bonkers Britain's broken borders laid bare, and
We can now reveal that Lee Anderson met with Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform UK party, on Sunday, lunchtime.
we have got the inside story of Lee Anderson's possible defection to Reform. On my panel tonight is GBNews star Nana Akua. We've got Tory MP Jonathan Gullis and author Amy Nicole-Turner. And hey, if you think our police are useless... It's just a pull door, that, mate. Anyway, get ready, Britain, here we go. The media is trying to cover up a massive Labour scandal. I reveal all next.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom tonight is that the suspended Tory MP Lee Anderson has held private talks with the leader of the Reform UK party leader, Richard Tice. It's fuelled speculation that the former deputy chair of the Tory party is about to defect to the rival party. GB News understands they met for in-person talks in Derbyshire on Sunday. The meeting happened a day after Lee Anderson lost the whip for refusing to apologise after saying Islamists had control of the London mayor, Sadiq Khan. And also today, MP Paul Scully has apologised for saying there are no-go zones in Birmingham and in East London. The former minister made reference to areas with large Muslim communities, comments which he says he now regrets. Mr Scully admits he could have chosen his words more carefully. And MPs are warning that protests are putting unsustainable pressure on police resources. They're calling on the government to give more support as demonstrations continue over the Israel-Gaza war. A cross-party committee found that policing the protests between October and December last year cost forces more than £25 million. The BBC has apologised to the family caught up in the Hugh Edwards scandal over the way their complaint was handled. It follows claims the news presenter paid for explicit photographs of a teenager. A review into how non-editorial complaints are handled identified a number of failures and says there's a need for greater consistency when it comes to addressing concerns. The report found the initial complaint about Mr Edwards was not logged on to the relevant case management system, so could not be seen by senior figures, according to the BBC. The Prince of Wales has had to pull out of a royal event to honour his late godfather because of what's being described as a personal matter. Instead, Queen Camilla led the royal family during a memorial for King Constantine of Greece. Prince William had been due to deliver a reading at the service. Kensington Palace didn't elaborate, but confirmed the Princess of Wales, who's recovering from abdominal surgery, is doing well. The King also missed the service as he continues treatment for cancer. Prince and Princess Michael of Kent's son-in-law, Thomas Kingston, has died. The King and Queen have sent their most heartfelt thoughts and prayers to Lady Gabriella Kingston and Mr Kingston's family. The 45-year-old was found dead at an address in Gloucestershire on Sunday evening. A statement from the family says Tom was an exceptional man who lit up the lives of all who knew him. And GB News understands the Prince of Wales's absence from today's memorial isn't related to Mr Kingston's death. That's the latest news. For the latest news stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The Labour leader is facing calls to resign and the Labour deputy leader could be facing a police investigation. You would have thought this might be leading the news agenda, but instead the subservient and blatantly left-wing political press are too busy putting their energy into stories like this. Conservative source points out tonight that Rishi Sunak has never visited a mosque during his time as Prime Minister. All of his predecessors, Johnson, May, Cameron, visited mosques in their time. Rishi Sunak has held a reception for the Muslim community in Number 10 and sent wishes during key festivals. But considering he's visited most other major places of worship, some think it's surprising he hasn't yet visited a mosque, especially given the rise in community tensions. Who cares? Seriously. I mean, after all, Keir Starmer's last visit to a mosque went really well, didn't it? He was booted out and slammed by the Muslim Council of Wales. Top stuff. Anyway, back to the main point. All this talk of Islamophobia has meant Sir Keir Starmer's shameful leaning on the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, over the Gaza ceasefire vote. Surely a matter deserving of an immediate inquiry and very possibly Sir Keir's resignation has gone quiet. Step forward. Mr Morality. Labour MP Chris Bryant, who let the cat out of the bag on Channel 4.
The way we do our business in Parliament is terrible. I mean, we brought ourselves terribly into disrepute, I think, on Wednesday.
But were you put up to that filibuster, or did you take it upon yourself?
A bit of both, if I'm honest. I think the whole day was grubby, right. And we need a system which doesn't allow people to manipulate the rules to be able to get what they want.
Yeah, which you did, didn't you? I mean, is that Labour's Chris Bryant engaging in dirty tricks so that the Labour leader could pressure the Speaker into breaking convention to save his skin from a massive shadow front and backbench rebellion in a general election year? You mean this Chris Bryant, who literally wrote the book called Code of Conduct, Why We Need to Fix Parliament and How to Do It? You mean this Chris Bryant, who has refused for years to apologise to Nigel Farage for baseless claims that he was funded by the Russians, until very recently? Well, I, for one, am shocked. Shocked. That, unequivocally, is an investigation and potential resignation matter for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Lindsay Hoyle is certainly facing the consequences. It's been revealed tonight, in fact in the last few minutes, that the number of MPs backing a no-confidence motion in the Speaker has now climbed to 86. Well, now on to the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner's potential prison sentence. The allegation is that in January 2006, the Right Honourable Member for Ashton-under-Lyne brought her council house in Vicarage Road, Stockport, with a £26,000 discount under Margaret Thatcher's Right to Buy scheme. She was registered on the electoral roll there from 2005 to March 2015. In 2010, she married Mark Rayner, but confusingly, they were listed at different addresses for the next 5 years. She gave her address as Vicarage Road, yet he gave his address as Lowndes Lane, a mile away. More mysteriously, when she re-registered the births of her two youngest children that same year, she gave her address as Lowndes Lane. Now, under electoral rules, voters are expected to register at their permanent home address. Anyone who knowingly provides false information about the address they are registered to vote at could face conviction and a prison sentence. Tenants must repay some of the discount they received if they sell within 5 years. The question then, obviously, is was Angela Rayner lying about where she lived to avoid paying this? Well, then today, Guido Fawkes, the political website, published the birth certificate of one of Angela Rayner's children. They then quoted the law. Quote, any false statement with intent to have the same inserted in any register of birth or death, he shall be guilty of a misdemeanour and shall be liable on conviction thereof on indictment to penal servitude for a term not exceeding 7 years or to imprisonment. Right, so Angela Rayner obviously denies any wrongdoing, but Guido Fawkes are adamant, writing, either Angela Rayner lied on the birth certificate or she is lying now. If she told the truth on the birth certificate, she was liable for capital gains tax. If she did not, she is in breach of Section 4 of the Perjury Act 1911. Surely the police should have a little look into this. You've also got the fact that Labour MP for, I think it's Fleetwood actually, and ex-Shadow Cabinet Minister Cat Smith has now been reported to the Standards Commissioner for allegedly using her taxpayer-funded £11,000 a year stationery budget for campaigning. Now, look, certainly the first two of those are big stories. The Labour leader should face an urgent investigation and could possibly be forced to resign as a result, and the deputy Labour leader could face a police investigation. This is huge. In my view, it should be leading the news agendas. There are massive questions to answer. Massive. But I know what you all really want to know. When are they going to visit a mosque? Yeah, that's right. But let's get the thoughts of my panel now. We have got GBNews presenter Nana Akua. We've got Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, Jonathan Gullis, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Nana, do you think that Sir Keir Starmer should face an investigation
Well, I think he absolutely should do. We remember what happened with Beergate, though, not much. But the SNP are calling for the Privileges Committee to look into this. But, of course, the Privileges Committee then have to ask Sir Lindsay Hoyle, he's the Speaker, to push forward with this motion. So you remember what happened last time with the Privileges Committee. Harriet Harman is at the top of that. She's Labour. Skippy, I call her, a.k.a. Skippy, because she held the kangaroo court. But, honestly, Keir Starmer has just literally slipped under the radar with everything. And, you know, what's happening with Mayor Khan and Lee Anderson, they are pushing this so much so that I think that the light is not shone on the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, Lee Anderson, as he's admitted, has handed a little bit of a gift here. The timing was bad, but now we are talking about Islamophobia. In fact, I can tell you as well that Sadiq Khan is currently out of the Kebab Awards, right? And no word of a lie, he is talking about Islamophobia and racism. Seriously, we'll bring you a clip of that later on. But, Jonathan, instead of talking about what I would argue is much bigger news, which is the fact that the Labour leader should, in my view, be facing an investigation and possibly a resignation, and the Labour deputy leader might be investigated by police.
Well, look, first of all, let's get to what happened with Sir Keir Starmer. The facts that have not been disputed by the Labour Party is that Alan Campbell, the chief whip for the Labour Party, went in to the Reasons room behind the Speaker's chair, one-to-one with the Speaker, and came out looking cross, which means that, in our opinion, ultimately he didn't get his way. A while later, he's gone back in that room with the Speaker alone, but this time with Sir Keir Starmer. And when they left the room, they're smiling. Sir Keir Starmer's been accused of telling the Speaker on the way out of the chamber by Dr. Luke Evans, saying thank you as he's walked out of the chamber. And clearly the Speaker gave his initial reason was that he wanted the broadest range of view before having been eventually dragged back to the chair and suddenly playing the security card as a way to cover his own tracks. If this was the other way round, if this had been Boris Johnson, if this was Rishi Sunak, this would be before the Privileges Committee in a heartbeat. So Keir Starmer has to answer questions as to what he said to the Speaker, and whilst he himself has said he didn't make any threats to the Speaker about retaining that position post the next election if Labour were in government, he hasn't said whether or not anyone else within the Labour Party, whether that be their chief whip or any other shadow minister or shadow whip. Those are questions that need answering, as well as the Speaker answering those questions as well. And as you know, I've signed that early day motion. I have no confidence in the Speaker. Plaid Cymru are now the second party to come out in total and say they have no faith or confidence in the Speaker. He has to go. And once the Speaker's gone, then all eyes will be on Sir Keir Starmer.
OK, all right. I mean, Amy, surely, if nothing wrong has gone on here, I mean, Angela Rayner should welcome a little knock on one of the doors, anyway, by Greater Manchester Police. And maybe, as well, Keir Starmer should welcome an investigation in Parliament as well.
I think Keir Starmer would probably welcome an investigation because he's quite confident that nothing wrong has happened here. It is true that Lindsay Hoyle willingly went against convention. Yes, we know that. But the question is why? And the explanation that Lindsay Hoyle gave, I have great faith in, because if you asked around for character references of Lindsay Hoyle, there's not really anyone that has a bad word to say about his integrity, about his ability to do the job. He's been commended on his ability to do the job throughout his time as Speaker. And when you saw him apologise, which is something that we yet to see the likes of Lee Anderson do, he admitted his mistake and his apology was incredibly sincere. And you could hear the emotion in his voice.
The difficulty with this is we all know how the media works, and we've been proven completely correct with the exception of literally what we're doing right now on this show, which is that the consequence of Lindsay Hoyle making the decision that he made on potentially having been lent on by Sir Keir Starmer is that it completely avoided the reality, which is that there were supposedly about 100 Labour MPs, including frontbenchers, that were about to revolt on this, including, like I said, frontbench MPs. That's all gone away now, and the focus has been on Lindsay Hoyle, and now, again, the focus is on...
By the way, Patrick...
But hang on a minute, the result of the vote would have predominantly been very similar either way.
Let's be very clear, though. The Speaker...
Yeah, there would have been a rebellion, but the vote would have gone through, and with the same consequence for the people of Gaza.
Amy, very quickly, the Speaker, let's not forget, has... I'm sorry, the Speaker's played the security card after he's been called back and obviously been caught out in what he's done. He's then promised a standing order 24 debate where he gives the SNP control. He's literally said those words on the floor of the House. And what happened yesterday, he said, actually, I'm not going to give you that. So he's already made another promise to the SNP that he can't deliver on and has ultimately renegated on that. As for Angela Rayner, Patrick, I've written the letter to Angela Rayner, which has led to the Guido Fawkes story, asking the questions. She purchased this property, 80 Vicarage Road, back in January 2007. She's married then Mark Rayner in September 2010. She's re-registered her children's births at 126 Lowndes Lane, which is property owned at the time of the marriage by Mark Rayner. She's, however, remained on the electoral roll of 80 Vicarage Road, but at the same time, her brother is now at 126 Lowndes Road, as are the children. So either she's lived separately from her children, her brother and her husband, at 80 Vicarage Road, or she hasn't, and has therefore actually kept herself in the electoral roll at the initial property that
Jonathan,
she bought.
what's the
so
figure?
It's either
What's the
electoral
figure in
commission
capital
rules
gains
have been
tax?
broken, or she's not paid the capital gains tax that she should have paid.
Isn't it about
Well, wait a minute.
£80,000? That's up for debate.
Money's money.
So
to
do you
the
not
Treasury.
think this
But
might be
that's
the
not the
media
point.
just going through things with a fine-tooth
but that's
comb, and that
not
was
the point.
probably an oversight,
No,
if
no, it's
anything?
not
I'm
an
saying
oversight.
tonight.
There's no
No oversight. She's registering people.
Look at the expenses scandal.
no,
Hang on a minute. Do you know what's
talked
so
about
frustrating about all this? The amount of Tory MPs that have, for example, Nadeem Zahawi taking public money
But why are you
to heat
talking
his
about him?
stables.
Hold on a minute.
Whoa.
Hold on, you're going
That was
backwards.
corrected. He
Yeah.
paid that money back in full.
Way
because of an accident.
more money.
Amy,
That was
you're
back in
going
2010, I
backwards.
think.
You're going
Just to
backwards. We're talking about now. And what's going on now is that Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner appear to be doing some things that somehow seem somewhat shady, and they need to be investigated. And I love the fact that you actually talk about integrity then and mention, what about Sue Gray? She was supposed to be full of integrity, and what did she turn out to be?
She's a completely impartial civil servant. She was brilliant at her job and now works for the Labour Party.
He's now Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer.
It might surprise you, but people are capable of doing two different
running
things.
for Parliament. She's clearly a Labour stooge who, at the end of the day, has done everything she can to undermine the Labour Party by coming up with this Citizens' Assembly nonsense that had to get slapped down. Is at war with Labour's own campaign guru at the moment in a briefing against each other in the media. Has actually got a complaint for breaching the rules of engagement by grabbing people's phones and demanding to search through WhatsApp without a trade union representative present. Sue Gray has shown exactly who she is,
But
and
all
she deserves
these
everything that's coming
stories,
her
all
way.
these stories, people
Obviously, Sue Gray
combing
would
through the
deny
likes of
wrong.
Angela Rayner's
think she
historic
can.
housing purchases. It's just because
If
Labour
she's got nothing
are
to
about
hide,
to get
then
a
why not answer my
landslide.
question?
She should just come up front and-
Let's throw an umbrella over this now and say, do we not think that it's absolutely remarkable that all of the things we've spoken about tonight appear to be not making up the 10 o'clock news on the vast majority of the establishment media channels?
No.
All they can talk about-
Instead, they are literally talking about whether or not Rishi Sunak should visit a mosque.
Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it? That's all they care about. I think it's so left-leaning. They don't. I listened to a radio station today, and literally, I just felt nobody like me would phone up to this radio station ever, because you would be shouted down in a hail of flames. That is the problem, and I think they're obsessed with their little Westminster bubble and not actually understanding what is happening outside.
You think people are obsessed with the house that Angela Rayner had a right to buy in
Yes, I think they're more interested in
2015?
it.
Especially when she's
This is
not
hilarious. Islamophobia.
She's the housing minister.
Oh my God!
And she's
How many years ago? It was 2015.
She's the shadow housing minister, and if she has breached the rules on capital gains
You would
tax,
love it. You'd be rubbing your hands together. Fingers
or if
crossed.
she has breached the rules around the electoral commission, then if she's got nothing to hide, then submit herself to a full investigation.
Okay, all right. Well, look, hey, lively start. I'm glad we're having this conversation. Look, just quickly, in case you thought I was making it up about Sadiq Khan being at the Kebab Awards earlier and some of the things he was saying on stage, I believe we have now managed to get a clip of Sadiq Khan at the Kebab Awards.
Responsible politicians know that at a time when emotions are understandably running high, we should seek to turn down the temperature and unite, not divide. Responsible politicians also know that racism and prejudice, no matter what form it takes, regardless of whether it's anti-Semitism or, yes, Islamophobia, should be countered and condemned, not given a free pass or left unchallenged for electoral gain.
It's the Kebab Awards. So just talk about kebabs, right, and do one. Anyway, Got a bit of cleaning up to do now. Angela Rayner said, being able to buy my council house back in 2007 was a proud moment for me. I worked hard, saved and bought it by the book. I'm not ashamed, but I'm angry that the Tories, that's you, Jonathan, have since put the dream of a secure home out of reach for so many others. A Labour spokesperson said Angela, who had an older child from a previous relationship, and her husband maintained their existing residences before moving into their shared marital home.
When did they move in together?
I am also at pains to say Sue Gray probably denies being a Labour stooge. Anyway, still to come. The Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, David Neal, was brutally sacked on Microsoft Teams. So why doesn't our feckless Home Office show a shred of that toughness when it comes to actual illegal migration? But up next in the head-to-head, local Tories are branding Rishi Sunak a snake. Does he urgently need to reinstate Lee Anderson to the Tory party? Is it too late? There's a Conservative civil war taking place to get ready for a blue-on-blue battle. It's David Campbell-Bannerman, Mr Grassroots, this guy, locking horns with Albi Amankona. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves, people are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News, and it is time now for the head-to-head. Yeah, well, it's a big one, isn't it, really? So Tory supporters have lashed out at Rishi Sunak, who they have branded a snake, not my words, for suspending Lee Anderson from the party. Well, a Guardian exclusive has uncovered that several members of the Conservative Democratic Organisation endorsing Lee's controversial comments via WhatsApp, while Sunak was slammed as weak and feeble and, again, not my words, a nutsack. Another member told the WhatsApp group it's time for the snake of a PM to go. So it obviously is kicking off in quite rude terms behind the scenes. Now, the CDO has also launched a petition to have the Red Wall MP reinstated, with more than 11,000 signatories already. Anderson had the whip suspended after refusing to apologise for comments he made about London Mayor Sadiq Khan. And in an exclusive interview on this very show last night, it didn't sound like he was going to budge.
You saw the statement that I produced on Saturday, which I was willing to go with. It's shown a little bit of contrition in there, although I didn't directly apologise to Mayor Khan, which I'm not going to, not while I've got a breath in my body, because the comments I made weren't racist at all.
But pressure continues to grow on the former deputy chair of the Tory party, James Cleverly, the latest big hitter to call for an apology.
I think Lee should apologise. What he said wasn't accurate. It wasn't fair. But the Chief Whip and the Prime Minister have made the party position absolutely clear on this.
So tonight, I am asking, should the Prime Minister reinstate Lee Anderson? Let me know your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at gbnews. While you're there, go and vote in our poll. The results will come very shortly. But first, going head-to-head on this, our political commentator, Albie Amancona, and GB News presenter as well, let's not do him down, and former Conservative MEP David Campbell-Bannerman. Chaps, thank you very, very much. David, I'll start with you. Should Rishi Sunak come grovelling back to Lee Anderson, give him the whip back?
I think it would make a lot of sense to give him the whip back, Patrick. I mean, you know, I think it's a really foolish decision to remove the whip. We've taken the heat off Starmer, who was on the ropes after all the problem of pressurising, allegedly, the Speaker, and all the trouble that's come out of that. And now we have this race row, and it's not about race. I don't think Lee Anderson is anti-Muslim anyway or racist. And I think it's very foolish, and it's really let Starmer off the hook, and he may even leave the party now, and that would be disastrous for the Conservative Party. OK, now, Albie, is there not some truth to what David's saying there? You know, Rishi Sunak caving in, losing the red wall, all of that?
No, there's no truth in it whatsoever. Look, what Lee did was wrong, and as a child, I was always taught when you make mistakes, you apologise. Now, I understand Lee accepts that he made a mistake. He's described his language as clumsy. It's not something he wishes he would have done. It's probably not something he would do again. So he's admitted fault, so he should apologise. There is also, of course, the perception that what Lee has said is anti-Muslim, and this whole row has taken away from the very serious issue of Islamist extremism in this country. And I think that's absolutely unforgivable, because last week we had a situation in Parliament where Islamist extremists pressured the Speaker into changing the rules to what looked like favoured Labour. And now we're having a discussion about a race row within the Conservative Party, all because an MP said something which was wrong. So, no, I do not think the whip should be restored unless Lee Anderson apologises. Where there is contrition, there should be forgiveness. But if there's no contrition, there should be no forgiveness.
Well, look, obviously, Albie, and to be fair, a lot of people out there do think that what Lee Anderson said was wrong. I'll be honest with you, David, I think the vast majority of people think he was absolutely bang on the money with a lot of what he said, certainly the sentiment of it, and therefore he shouldn't apologise, and actually it's Rishi Sunak who's wrong.
Well, I think he should apologise for saying that Mayor Khan hung out with his Islamist mates. I think that went a bit far. But, you know, I'd love to know from Albie, how do you define Islamophobia? Because the Labour Party can't define it. They were on Radio 4 this morning. Annalisa Dodds, chair of the party, she couldn't define it. The government ignored, is actually trying to avoiding actually mentioning Islamophobia. It's not a helpful term. I think Kemi Badenoch is right when she says we should use anti-Muslim hatred, which we are united in saying is totally unacceptable.
David, respectfully, I didn't use the word Islamophobia. You did. I agree with Kemi Badenoch's definition of anti-Muslim sentiment, and I think that is right. And there are many Muslims within the Conservative Party who I've spoken to from the Conservative Muslim Forum who say what he has said is anti-Muslim, and I think we should listen to them. When Jewish people told me that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, was a racist and anti-Semitic slur, I believed them. Why is it that we're not believing Muslim members of the Conservative Party when they say what Lee Anderson said was anti-Muslim?
OK, David?
Well, that's because you're just allowing a group of people to basically, create a definition that is wrong. I have a real worry about the definition of this. And also the label racist. Islam is not a race. It's a religion, and that is confusing too. So let's just stick to what Kemi Badenoch said. Anti-Muslim hatred, we all agree, is totally unacceptable. I don't think he showed anti-Muslim hatred.
David, if the Mayor of London was Jewish and someone said that he's controlled by the Jewish establishment, what do you think should happen to that person if they were an MP? Would you think that MP should
Can I just counter that slightly out? Could I just before I let David, can I just counter that slightly? If the Mayor of London who was Jewish had appeared on a platform 9 times with somebody who was an out-and-out radical Jewish person or whatever it was, and wanted to do all sorts of mad stuff in the Middle East, right? Then would it not be reasonable, Albie, to pose that question? We're not just saying he's not just piping out something that's completely baseless here, is he? In the sense that Sadiq Khan has, as has been widely reported, shared a platform an uncomfortable amount of times with some incredibly fruity characters, Albie.
Patrick, what Lee said was that Sadiq Khan was controlled by Islamists and he'd given away London to his mates. That is very different from a platform that he shared with some pretty bad people. I think it was in the early 2000s. We can condemn that.
One of the people who supposedly was a mastermind behind 7/7
Patrick, what Lee said the other day, you agreed, was wrong. It is wrong to say the Mayor of London is mates with and controlled by Islam. And as I mentioned before, I was taught as a child, when you make mistakes, you apologise.
All right. Look, David, if Lee Anderson, as it is being strongly rumoured this evening, and later on in the show we've got a bit of an inside track on this, but it's strongly rumoured this evening to be on the cusp of joining the Reform Party, does Rishi Sunak just have to swallow his words and say to him, Lee, come back because you're going to decimate the Red Wall?
Well, I think it's a disaster for the Conservative Party. It's an accident that shouldn't have happened. And I'm afraid the spotlight is on Rishi Sunak for causing this row and diverting attention right away from Keir Starmer and his terrible record on this. So, no, I think it's a disaster. And by the way, Mayor Khan actually talked about white families are not representative of London, and that, there's too many white men on Transport for London. So let's actually look at what Mayor Khan's record is, because it's not perfect. Thank you.
All right, just for the sake of absolute clarity then, Albie, you'll say even if it means that Lee Anderson defects to Reform, and even if the grassroots of the Conservative Party, in your view wrongly, fair enough, but the grassroots of the Conservative Party, the overwhelming majority of which think he was right for what he said, you still think that he should have the whip removed, and that's that, as far as you're concerned, Albie?
Well, the grassroots of the Conservative Party that I know do not all think what Lee Anderson said was right. I would question where you're getting your opinion from, that you somehow are the Speaker of the grassroots of the Conservative Party.
I'm not the Speaker of it. I think I'm quite...
I was at a Tory party event in Westminster before I came to the studio tonight, Patrick, and I can tell you not everyone there thinks that Lee Anderson was right in what he said. I think what Lee Anderson said was wrong. He should apologise, and then he should be let back into the party. But if he's not going to apologise, he's not coming back in.
And David, finally, for your point, absolute clarity, you just think they should just let him back in?
Yes, I think he should apologise for the remark about Islamist mates. I don't think that was acceptable. But that's all he has to do. And let's move on from this and put the focus back onto Labour.
Totally agree, David.
Well, yeah. I mean, what is fascinating, and this is the point we can't avoid, is that Lee Anderson is not going to do that, right? So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But both of you, thank you very much. Good stuff, that. So look, who do you agree with? As Tory supporters lash out at Rishi Sunak, should the Prime Minister reinstate Lee Anderson? Tony on X says yes. Lee Anderson kept the Conservative Party right by keeping silly wokeness out of the party. Leslie says no, the Tories are finished. Lee should move to reform. Ria says possibly yes, but he won't ever have a voice again if he goes back. So it's better he's independent or maybe join reform. Your verdict is in. 86% of you agree that the Prime Minister should reinstate Lee Anderson. 14% of you say that he should not. Right, coming up. Is Suella Braverman right that the Tory Islamophobia row has descended into hysteria? Muslim solicitor Yunus Lunat will take on the former Home Secretary about all of that, and the sacked Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration has been calling out the clown in the Home Office today. What he says is extremely worrying. I will play that to you next. Some quite astonishing revelations from that chap, actually. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. You don't want to miss a second.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting.
Yeah.
And that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, all right, this is Patrick Christys tonight, and we are only on GB News. Now, the sacked Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, David Neal, was grilled by MPs today, and he used the opportunity to lash out at the government. Have a little look.
Been sacked for doing my job.
You were actually dismissed by Teams, did you just say?
Yes, I was, yeah. And worse than that, the notification that I was sacked was in the media before my team or I had the chance to speak to them, which is just shocking. You know, shocking leadership.
Well, Neal was fired after details from a confidential report about potential security threats appeared in the media. But asked about the leaks today, he launched his blistering defence.
Legislation doesn't require us to comment to the Daily Mail, but it does.
You did, though, didn't you?
It does require us to expose. I think there is a higher calling here that it does require us to expose, you know, what's going on. And if there's something going on that that I think is, you know, at risk to the country, then I think there is a duty to expose it.
Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Mike Jones, who is the executive director of the think tank Migration Watch, which campaigns for lower immigration. Now, look, when it comes to immigration, Mike, do you think the Home Office is fit for purpose at all? Are they doing quite a bad job?
Yes, they are. I mean, you've got to remember Mr Neal is a patriot. You know, he was trained at Sandhurst, he served with NATO, he was responsible for the inspection of various UK detention facilities, yet he broke his silence because there were numerous reports, around 15, that were kicked into the long grass. They weren't published. They gathered dust at Whitehall. And, you know, allegedly these reports have exposed systemic failures within the Home Office. And essentially Mr Neal was sacked because he did his job and did it very well.
So you think there is a chance that he was sacked essentially for being too good at his job and wanting to talk about the truth, basically?
Yeah, I mean, he was sacked because he lost the confidence of the Home Secretary. And, I mean, Mr Neal's issue was, you know, first with certain general aviation flights that weren't properly checked and scrutinised from high-risk countries. And he also had an issue with the social care visa, which essentially acted as a Trojan horse for economic migration into other sectors of the economy. So, yeah, I think he's done his job very well, and unfortunately he's paying the consequences.
I mean, it does raise the question, doesn't it, really, which is that if you do your job very well behind the scenes in the Home Office and you get too close to, frankly, exposing the reality, which is that, I mean, it sounds and looks a lot like a complete circus, then you end up getting booted out whilst everybody else manages to just plod along. Look, just responding to Mr Neal's comments today, Labour's Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock said this: the Chief Inspector's evidence makes clear what the British public already knew, that the Conservatives have undermined our border security and are failing to show any proper leadership to sort it out. Rather than confront uncomfortable truths, the government is hiding them, sitting on 15 unpublished reports which are likely to expose failings in their handling of UK borders. Those must be published immediately. The Conservatives have lost control of our borders, have no plan to fix them, he says. Only Labour can deliver the change that we need. Well, all right, fine, but, I mean, it remains to be seen, doesn't it? The Home Office have also said, look, they take border security very seriously, as you would expect. But James Cleverly came out and said something today as well, which is about this idea that we now need to do more to promote the well-being of other countries in order to cut back on illegal immigration. So, essentially, he said this.
Well, the point I was making is that the proper management of immigration is not just a national issue, it's an international issue. And that also we work together to try and prevent the drivers of mass migration, things like conflict, things like climate change, and we boost the economic prosperity of those countries that are currently exporting people across the world.
Look, I think this is a massive question now, right, which is that does the British taxpayer have a responsibility to pump what will inevitably be tens of billions of pounds into poorer, worse countries in order to stop people leaving those countries to come here illegally, do you think?
Well, I was actually quite disappointed with Mr Cleverly's speech. You know, I'd read snippets that were leaked to the tabloid and broadsheet press, and I was expecting something quite substantial. But ultimately, it was an exercise in evasion of responsibility. You know, Mr Cleverly said that, you know, if we level up developing economies, then that will reduce the pull factor in terms of illegal migration. You know, we liberalise markets, have a more strategic aid policy. But the problem is this has been tried in the past and it's failed. Now, international aid does make a difference at the margins, but it's not going to revolutionise developing economies. The problem with developing countries, particularly in Africa, is their dependence on primary commodity exports. You know, that underlies issues with debt and their marginalisation from overseas markets. But that's going to require massive internal reform. You know, a few strokes of the Whitehall pen and increasing international aid is not going to make a substantial difference to the pull factor. Ultimately, if you want to stop illegal migration from developing countries, you need to look at domestic laws.
Yeah, you've got to control your own borders.
Precisely, whether that's the Human Rights Act or membership of the ECHR.
Yeah, and where does this money go? And also, where are we getting this money from? You know, people aren't still seeing their energy bills sky high. People are still struggling to make ends meet at the moment. I think it's incredibly hard to justify to the British public that after trying everything, we can't even get flights to Rwanda off the ground. Oh, but if you give us another £10 billion and we send it to somewhere, you know, in the third world or whatever, then maybe it'll stop people coming. It won't, will it? But look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Much appreciated. Of course, right now, coming up, Paul Scully might be backtracking on his claims about Birmingham and Tower Hamlets being no-go zones, but I will be revealing which area is the real no-go zone right here on this show. But next, Suella Braverman claims that, quote, hysteria over the Tory Islamophobia row is distracting from the real threat of Islamist extremism. Is she right? Now, I will be joined by prominent Muslim lawyer Yunus Lunat, who acted as a spokesman for the parents who hounded out the school teacher in Batley, that famous Batley Grammar School incident. This is Patrick Christys tonight. I will see you in a sec.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake, civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, it's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News. Now, look, coming up, should Keir Starmer face an investigation for allegedly coercing Sir Lindsay Hoyle? But first, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has claimed the problem facing Britain and the Tories this week is not Islamophobia. So she said, "We need to urgently focus now on the big problem, how to tackle Islamist extremism in the UK. The hysteria in response to those calling out the crisis is one of the reasons why we're not making progress." Now, if you're wondering what exactly she's referring to, well, what's this?
Was it Islamophobic? Minister, was it Islamophobic? Nick, it was wrong.
Was what Lee Anderson said Islamophobic?
Go on, Minister, yes or no? Was it Islamophobic?
Are you allergic to the words Islamophobic?
Islamophobia is rooted in racism.
It's Islamophobia when it comes to Islamophobia.
Yeah, I mean, there's a heck of a lot of mention of it, isn't there? And not a huge amount of mention of actual Islamism, which has been a huge problem. And if we all take it right back to the initial point where all of this kicked off, arguably how all of this started. But I'm joined now by equalities lawyer Eunice Lunat. So thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. So, first and foremost, is Suella Braverman right, do you think, that the Tory Islamophobia row has descended into hysteria?
Evening, Patrick. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Sorry, I don't know if there's a bit of a delay. Is it hysteria?
Sorry, just say that again. There's a delay. I can't hear you properly.
Is it hysteria?
What is?
The Tory Islamophobia row.
If it's hysteria, it's been caused by the Tories. There seems to be hysteria in the media. It's caused by the Tories.
Right, so do you agree, then, that the people are being overly hysterical about Islamophobia and then ignoring Islamism?
Well, not really, no. I don't agree. I don't disagree. I don't really have a view on that. If that's how the Tories want to behave, it's a matter for them.
Right. Do you understand what you're on to talk about, though, don't you? Which is why we booked you, which is to respond to Suella Braverman's comments. So do you think that Islamophobia sometimes is used maybe as a shield to deflect from Islamism?
Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, so essentially what they're saying is that at the moment our Speaker revealed that MPs were under terrorist threats, and those threats were from people towards MPs from the Islamist section of society. And then what's happened is that subsequently we have now seen the comments entirely about Islamophobia and not about that. I could also maybe make a point as well of something that I think you have personal involvement with, which was the Batley Grammar School incident, for example, which is that there was an incident there which was deemed to be Islamophobic, where a teacher showed a picture of the Prophet Muhammad to some children, and then what happened was a load of people essentially erupted outside the school gates, and that individual has had to remain in police.
Patrick, I find it baffling, Patrick. Every time I come on your show, and once a week at least, your programme has to mention the Batley Grammar School incident. What I think Batley is more famous for is Thomas Mayer. Why don't we talk about Thomas Mayer? What he's famous for. That's the root cause of a lot of this. You keep mentioning, I'm not here to talk about the Batley Grammar School incident, you're bringing that up. I don't understand why every time I'm going to bring that incident.
Sorry, Eunice, I am slightly confused.
My role in that was bringing that to an end.
Right, OK. I am slightly confused as to why you've agreed to come on, because we are obviously here to talk about Islamism and Islamophobia. If you're not going to answer the questions at all, then there's no really...
What my understanding, what I'm here about is what's the threat to democracy. Is there a threat to democracy? That's what I've been told. Is there what's happening in this instance? Is there a threat to democracy? Now, I think you just misrepresented what the Speaker said in the House of Lords. The Speaker did not say that there was threats of Islamism, there was threats of terrorism. The Speaker did say there may have been threats.
He did say, I don't want there to be another terrorist attack. And then, obviously, the major threat at the moment, as has been evidenced by Prevent, etc., is coming from the Islamist side of things. So that's what I'm saying to you. So I'm just asking you to respond to Suella Braverman's comments, which have made massive headlines today, which is, do you think at times Islamophobia is used as a defence mechanism to not discuss the real issue of Islamism?
Patrick, what MI5 will tell you is the major threat to society today is from far right.
No, that's a lie.
And if I mention Brogan Stewart, Christopher Ringrose, Marco Pitetsu, will they mean anything to you?
Yeah, OK, look, I'm going to stop you there, Eunice, because that's actually factually inaccurate. You know, you're an equalities lawyer. I'm sure that you like to deal with facts, which is a shame. So what's factually inaccurate is that we've literally just had the review into the Prevent scheme, which reveals that the overwhelming threat to this country is Islamist extremism. That is a threat that dominates MI5. It's a threat that dominates the Prevent scheme. Now, far right might be the fastest growing threat, but Islamist extremism, as you well know, is a major threat.
Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence that the threats to MPs have been made by Muslims or Islamists? Where's the threat?
David Amos was stabbed to death.
Yes.
Mike Freer has decided that he can't stand it any longer. So that is that. And I obviously also talked to a huge number of MPs as well who confirmed that to me.
Right.
So that's...
I'll respond to that point. I'll respond to that point, Patrick. I'll respond to that point. Mike Freer had an arson attack on his offices on New Year's Eve. Yes.
It's not just the arson attack, though, is it?
Yeah, no, I'll come on to that. And the people that have been charged with the arson attack are called Paul Harwood and Zara Kassouri.
Yeah. See, I didn't bring up the arson attack, did I?
Muslims.
Oh,
And the person that made the threat to his office telephoned 3 times and said to him,
it's also Eunice, and I have to stop you there because Eunice, I have to stop you there because it's an active case. It's completely pointless. You've been an absolute disgrace, frankly, coming on. You're not wanting to talk about anything. I don't know why you've wasted everybody's time on what's a vital issue of the day. Eunice, thank you very much. Now, coming up, after Lee Anderson's top-secret meeting with Richard Tice's Reform Party, is he going to defect to the Tories? Philip Davies joins me for the Inside Track. And,
that warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It will be a foggy start for some of us tomorrow, but it should stay dry across eastern areas. But through this evening, we'll see a weather front push into the southeast, so that's when there's the greatest risk of a chance of rain across southeastern areas. Behind it, though, it will turn much clearer. So some cloud and rain through this evening across the southeast, but elsewhere it should be a fairly dry evening. But some fog will start to develop quite quickly through the night, so it will be a bit of a murky start for many areas, particularly across central southern England, but also up through the Pennines and across eastern areas of Scotland as well. So we'll feel quite cold tomorrow morning once again, but it won't be quite as frosty as it was this morning. And there will be some early sunshine where we don't see any fog through tomorrow, particularly across the far east coast, and many southeastern areas should stay dry through much of the day. But elsewhere, it will turn much wetter as the day goes on, particularly across parts of the southwest of England and Wales, where we'll see some quite persistent rain at times, but also across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland and Northern England. But it will feel milder across the UK. The back of that rain will push into the southeast on Thursday, so quite a wet day to come in the southeast on Thursday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a mix of sunny spells and showers once that rain does clear through. And that's the story as we head through the rest of the week. A showery picture through Friday and Saturday as well. And after a milder spell through Wednesday and Thursday, it looks to turn colder from Friday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
The point I'm trying to make is if you look at parts of Tower Hamlets, for example, where there are no-go areas.
Well, there are no-go zones, and I'll tell you where they are. And
will you be a candidate for the Tory party in the next election?
Well, that's not up to me. That's out of my hands at the moment, Chopper, but I will be standing at the next election.
will the Lee Anderson scandal finish Sunak off? Well,
we can now reveal that Lee Anderson met with Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform UK party, on Sunday, lunchtime.
Are Reform about to cash in? Plus, military heroes live in squalor, illegal immigrants are basking in luxury. I've got all of tomorrow's front pages tonight with GB News star Nana Akua, Tory MP Jonathan Gullis and author Amy Nicole-Turner. Oh, and Joe Biden's sanity appears to be melting away.
Can you give us a sense of when you think that ceasefire will start, sir?
Get ready, Britain, here we go. No-go zones do exist. That's next.
Patrick, thank you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom tonight is that the suspended Tory MP Lee Anderson has been holding private talks with the leader of the Reform UK party, Richard Tice. It's fuelled speculation that the former deputy chair of the Tory party could be about to defect to the rival party. GB News understands they met in person for talks in Derbyshire on Sunday. The meeting happened a day after Lee Anderson lost the whip for refusing to apologise after saying Islamists had control of the London Mayor Sadiq Khan. And tonight, at an awards ceremony in London, the London Mayor reiterated his position about Mr Anderson's comments.
Responsible politicians also know that racism and prejudice, no matter what form it takes, regardless of whether it's anti-Semitism or, yes, Islamophobia, should be countered and condemned, not given a free pass or left unchallenged for electoral gain.
Sadiq Khan speaking earlier on this evening. Well, in other news today, the BBC has had to apologise to the family caught up in the Hugh Edwards scandal over the way their complaint was handled. It follows claims the news presenter paid for explicit photographs of a teenager. A review into how non-editorial complaints are handled identified a number of failures and says there's a greater need now for consistency when it comes to addressing concerns. The report found the initial complaint about Mr Edwards was not logged on to the relevant case management system, according to the BBC, so could not be seen by senior figures. Now, an 18th century pub that was destroyed in a suspected arson attack in the West Midlands must be rebuilt brick by brick by order of the local council. Britain's wonkiest pub, the Crooked House, was quickly demolished just 2 days after the fire last August. Now, an enforcement notice has been issued against its owners for the unlawful demolition of the local favourite pub. And South Staffordshire Council is ordering that it be rebuilt in its original state within 3 years. Meanwhile, a police investigation into the fire that burnt it down continues. Anyone with any information is still urged to come forward. Royal news, and the Prince of Wales pulled out of a royal event to honour his late godfather because of what's being described as a personal matter. Instead, Queen Camilla led the royal family during a memorial for King Constantine of Greece. Prince William had been due to deliver a reading at the service. Kensington Palace didn't elaborate, but confirmed the Princess of Wales, who's recovering from abdominal surgery, is doing well. The King also missed the service as he continues his treatment for cancer. 2 D-Day veterans have described the honour of having their names added to a memorial wall in Portsmouth. British military veterans Stan Ford and John Roberts were presented with their plaques today. A total of 13 names of Normandy veterans will be added to the wall as Portsmouth becomes the UK's official host to mark 80 years since the D-Day landings later on this year. For the very latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along. Now, no-go zones do exist. Tory MP Paul Scully got in a load of trouble for saying this.
Do you see the point I'm trying to make is if you look at parts of Tower Hamlets, for example, where there are no-go areas, parts of Birmingham, Sparkhill, where there are no-go areas, mainly because of doctrine and mainly because of people sort of abusing in many ways their religion.
Well, then there was a load of backlash, and he did what all men of principle and honour do: backtracked and apologised.
I used that term, and I've spoken a lot about the need to use a sensible language. I clearly didn't use the right language there. And why is that? Because actually it's a distraction from the direct opposite what I was trying to say, which is basically there are areas around every city in the country, frankly, which people are worried about going to, whether it's often based around gangs or a handful of idiots, frankly, that are threatening or intimidating or whatever like that.
Well, compare that, by the way, to Lee Anderson. No apologies there, are there? But he's right. There are no-go zones. There are giant mobile no-go zones of hate and anti-Semitism. There are no-go zones wherever the pro-Palestine mob turns up. Latest figures show the taxpayer has forked out £25 million on these horrible marches through London. That has taken up 26,121 Metropolitan Police officers' shifts so far and seen a giant surge in hate crimes. Anti-Semitic hate crimes went up 1,350% in October, and they're up to 5 times higher between October and December than they were in 2022. A spokesperson for the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism said the Jewish community is in fear and our city centres remain no-go zones during the protests. We need action urgently. Well, it isn't just the Jewish community, though. It's the ceasefire simps like Chris Bryant, fresh from admitting that he essentially bent the rules to help push through the Labour ceasefire amendment, getting hounded as he tried to get a bit of dinner.
Shame on you, Chris Bryant! Shame on you! Chris Bryant! Shame on you! Chris Bryant! Kids are dying! No ceasefire, no vote!
Well, we've also got people turning up at Tory dinner events in Stoke with the police, remarkably, waving them in. Here we go. Let's have a little look at this. In you come, lads. Oh, yeah. No issues there, we can see. And then, of course, they proceeded to, hound people, just normal, ordinary blokes having a pint and a curry.
You've got no backbone, and you guys are child killers and genocidal guys, all of you. Yes, I know this doctrine very well. You guys have no backbone. You are child murderers, and you are obsessive-compulsive freaks controlling the body. You all are part of a genocide. You are all a part of. I can point at you. Is it illegal? Take it like a man. Push hard. The shit in the video.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
I mean, that's a no-go zone there, isn't it? They've created a no-go zone. Tower Bridge was literally a no-go zone. You couldn't go anywhere because they blocked it. I mean, there are literally hundreds of examples of this stuff. And all of this takes police time away from community policing, which means we'll see loads more scenes like this. There we are. If you look closely, oh, that's just some men fighting with machetes in broad daylight. I don't know about you or what you would call a no-go zone, but that's certainly not a zone I would like to go in, OK? Now, these mobile no-go zones that we have springing up wherever the pro-Palestine brigade are not going to go away even if we get a ceasefire. Now, here's why. The MuslimVote.co.uk, which is an organisation that appeared after the October the 7th attacks and is predominantly focused on a ceasefire, tweeted this earlier. It said, Islamophobia is real and it is welcome that for once Labour and mainstream media are holding the Tories to account. But let's be real. Labour itself has an Islamophobia problem and this whole issue is being used as a political bludgeon to hit the Tories with. It's cynical. So they are now calling on the Labour Party to implement the findings of the Labour Muslims report. Well, let's have a little look into this report, all right? So this report wheels out a load of stats about Islamophobia in the Labour Party, how bad it is. Over 1 in 4 Muslim members have directly experienced Islamophobia in the Labour Party. These findings, apparently, came from a grand total of just 422 people. And off the back of those 422 people, they want the Labour Party to implement the following. Comprehensive Islamophobia training in conjunction with the Muslim Council of Britain, all policies to undergo an impact assessment when it comes to Muslim members, a handbook to educate Labour members on Islamophobia, adopt a definition of Islamophobia, but as it clearly says, adopting a definition of it isn't enough. They then need to go further and construct a code of conduct relating to Islamophobia in conjunction with, you guessed it, the Muslim Council of Britain. So, what do we end up with? No peace, no justice, is it? Until there's a ceasefire and all the recommendations from a survey, the size of which you could fit into Maidenhead United's football stadium 10 times over, until all of that's adopted. Look, we do have no-go zones in Britain, and they are wherever a mob decides that they want them to be. And if you don't believe they exist, then maybe you should ask a member of the Jewish community if they feel safe walking around, certainly in central London, on a Saturday. And if you think that doesn't really matter, then maybe you're an anti-Semite. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. I've got GB News presenter Nana Akua. I've got Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. It's the wonderful Jonathan Gullis. And I have got author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Nana, I will go to you first on this. When we talk about no-go zones, do you think that we do have them? Is it wherever this mob says they are, do you think?
Well, first of all, Patrick, great monologue. I happened to listen to that disastrous interview on LBC this afternoon with Paul Scully. And he started off talking about how he was wrong, it was his own personal experience. And then at one point, and then when it came back from the break, he said, oh, well, this is why I wish I hadn't sort of called you now and talked about it. It's like, I wish you hadn't. He talked about the fact that there aren't any no-go zones and he could only do it from his own personal experience. Well, that's what counts, isn't it? Your personal experience is what counts. So if you have experienced places where you cannot go to because of whatever, for whatever that situation is, and that's a no-go zone. And I was absolutely disgusted by the fact that he was so quick to capitulate and then not even acknowledge that there are no-go zones, in particular for Jewish people, on the weekends, every single Saturday, the pro-Palestinian protests. And to be frank, I wouldn't do that either. And as a woman, there are plenty of no-go zones.
I think what he conflated, Jonathan, to be fair, was... Firstly, he named a couple of examples. And, you know, we had a discussion in this office earlier today. I was like, oh, well, why don't I go to some of these places? And then we thought, well, they're literally not no-go zones if I can turn up with a camera and talk to people, right? So that was wrong. But I think there are occasions where a no-go zone can be created, like the kind of situation that I think we saw a bit in Stoke, where you've got a load of blokes there down the pub, essentially, and before you know it, they're being called child killers.
Well, we were hosting a fundraiser for our police crime commissioner, who was actually in the building at that time. We suddenly see that there's these protests taking place. Obviously, there was a hate mob spewing hatred and trying to intimidate and harass. The great concern about the officer in question who allowed the people into the building, because the organiser of this event, or one of the organisers of this event, had been, as up until 2015, a member of the now proscribed terrorist group Hizb ut-Tahrir, may well be still, we don't know, but was certainly active in 2009 to 2015 on social media, literally sharing articles themselves. So that's literally people's lives at danger, to be perfectly frank. And then to go and scream at members, one of those members in that video had his 11-year-old daughter there. is that your daughter's been called a child murderer, she's pro-genocide, to the point where she's so scared and upset that she's now fearful of going to any type of such event again. And then to have the police tell us that it's our event that must shut down, that MPs like Aaron Bell, who is due to attend, should not now go because the hate mob got what they wanted, is absolutely disgusting. And that is, therefore, a no-go zone, because even though we were in a private venue, in a private function room that we'd booked well in advance, it was us who had to capitulate to the mob when the mob themselves were on private property and could have easily been arrested for disrupting the peace or for causing intimidation and harassment. And it is weak policing that's allowed that to happen.
Amy, your view, presumably you don't think no-go zones exist at all, is that right?
Well, because all anyone can ever give is a few anecdotes, and I think what Jonathan's described is really concerning, and that is extremism, and those people need to be dealt with accordingly. But that doesn't make that pub a no-go zone. That's a ridiculous thing to suggest.
It does for that period of time.
I think for that period of time, maybe, like, it's not... You know what no-go zone means, and it means you can't go to that area for fear of extremism, and you're not being welcomed there.
Do you think
I don't think it's happening.
Zone for Jews?
On Saturday?
All right, let her answer that.
No, because there's so many Jews on those protests. I think what you need... There have been people holding up Jews for Palestine signs every single week in, week out. Can I just say one thing that you're all not mentioning is that people feel really, really helpless in the wake of Gaza. They see it on their social media. They see these horrendous... I saw a video today of 4 babies in an incubator that have no oxygen, let alone their parents are dead. There are 19,000 orphaned children in Gaza. People are seeing this unfold on their social media and they don't feel heard by the political class. And of course that's going to overspill into these protests. When do protests happen? When people don't feel heard by politicians.
I think, Amy, one thing we can say is we've heard more than enough and now wasting £25 million of taxpayers' money and dragging police officers from Stoke-on-Trent. But first of all, let me be clear. If you're Jewish, you've been on TFL. We've got tube drivers who have been chanting from the river to the sea, which is anti-Semitic. That's a misrepresentation of what happened. We've got bus drivers who have refused to pick up Jewish students. These are all things that Michael Ellis, MP, has put on the floor of the House, as a matter of fact, and has not been disputed. Then we've also got people projecting from the river to the sea, Palestine will feel, although they can't spell Palestine, so that should tell you something about others, being projected along the Elizabeth Tower. Again, the police standing by and doing nothing about that. There proves the point that if you are Jewish in this country, your capital city is too unsafe for you to go.
What you continue to do...
You're hiding your Star of David, you're taking your Yom Kippur hat off as well in order to hide your identity.
Anti-Semitism.
It's £25 million now, the point where we draw the line on these marches, because, you know, it is costing the taxpayers millions and millions of pounds. It is also taking away from community policing as well.
It's too much. I mean, if it were me and if they want to carry on with these marches, then I'd say I would want it'd be a ticketed event. They come in, I'd stamp everybody's hand, they pay a £5, otherwise you go. I would be making money out of these marches. I wouldn't allow it to carry on like this, or a wristband or there's stamps when you go into a club or bar, and I'd make sure everybody had one of those if they're coming to do these events. And I bet you, once they start paying for it themselves, these marches would stop. People wouldn't want to pay a £5. Anybody 16 or over, I've worked this out. I've sat down and written how I'd do it. 16 or over, you pay £5.
You know what? That's not a bad idea, because everybody would still go, and then we could give the money to the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign.
Brilliant. The money goes to the police.
Was Paul Scully wrong to just immediately row back? I mean, this is the polar opposite of what Lee Anderson is doing. And one of the reasons why Lee Anderson has got so much support is because he's stuck to his guns. Paul Scully comes out and says, look, I don't know if he's your mate. I don't want to dig him out unnecessarily, but, like, this is just the kind of cat-handed weakness that people hate about politics.
Well, look, the Birmingham Mail themselves had written an article about no-go zones in Birmingham, so
but
I think that tells you...
He couldn't provide the evidence.
And Patrick, your monologue...
What do you mean, so what? That's pretty important.
Patrick's monologue provided all the evidence. So, look, personally,
Where's the evidence?
I've got no issue with saying that there are no-go zones in certain parts of our country. Yes, they may be temporary. Yes, they may be because of a certain incident over a certain period of time. In that restaurant in Stoke, that was an example. But ultimately, the idea that they don't exist at all is for the birds.
He should have prepared himself better and found something.
If that was the case,
this line is just landing now, which is one of the reasons I was stalling for time. So, in an interview with The Times, James Cleverly has said, this is just dropped, you made your point. now end the Gaza protests. So the Home Secretary apparently argues that pro-Palestinian demonstrators are not saying anything new. Well, we will give you a more in-depth version of this story when we do our newspaper review very, very shortly, because we'll have the full details on that. But that could be fascinating, OK, because, you know, all right, Suella Braverman might have used more inflammatory language, calling them hate marches, but from what I can gather here, the nub of it is exactly the same, OK? So what's going to happen now? Is James Cleverly what? Going to ban the protests, is he? Can he? Anyway, coming up, I'll bring you a very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And next, it's emerged that Lee Anderson and Richard Tice had a secret meeting on Sunday, bizarrely at a Holiday Inn. Will Lee defect to Reform UK? Do the Tories even want to keep him? I've got Conservative MP Philip Davies joining me live in the studio to give his honest view of the Red Wall Rottweiler. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News. Stay tuned.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, now, very shortly, I will be bringing you all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But before that, it's a massive story. Still dominating the headlines. Rishi Sunak appears to be willing to lose Lee Anderson.
Well, I've been very clear that what Lee said was wrong, it was unacceptable, and that's why we suspended the whip. And it's important that everybody, but particularly elected politicians, are careful with their words and do not inflame tensions.
Well, in our exclusive interview last night with Lee, he wasn't too happy with his treatment from Rishi Sunak and the Tories.
I think the party could have given me a little bit more backing, if I'm honest.
And will you be a candidate for the Tory party in the next election?
Well, that's not up to me. That's out of my hands at the moment, Chopper, but I will be standing at the next election.
Today, GBNews revealed this exclusive information on where Lee's loyalties may lie in the future.
He now revealed that Lee Anderson met with Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform UK party, on Sunday, lunchtime. He was spotted there at a Holiday Inn at Junction 28 of the M1. We don't know what they discussed, but the timing is very telling, I think, 24 hours after he lost the whip.
Right, so, I mean, I suppose the big question really is whether or not Rishi Sunak should try to keep Lee Anderson. Should he come grovelling to him and accept him back? Joining me to discuss this is Tory MP Philip Davies and former Conservative MEP from 2004 to 2019 is Sajjad Karim. Both of them joining me. Thank you very much. Sajjad, I'll start with you if that's OK. So, look, Lee Anderson could defect to the Reform Party. Should he have lost the Tory whip in the first place? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the matter was dealt with by the Whip's office in an appropriate manner. They clearly, first of all, viewed what Lee Anderson had actually stated, and then having viewed it, took the steps that were necessary in the circumstances. So I certainly see the case for that having happened. What I'm sorry about is the fact that Lee Anderson has chosen to dig his heels in at this particular point. I would much rather he actually took a progressive attitude and actually examined his actions in the way they are objectively looked at, and then possibly reviewed the position at that stage.
OK. Philip, your view on this? I mean, it does look... There's quite a good chance, I think, that you're going to lose Lee Anderson to Reform.
Well, I don't think that follows. I mean, I don't think Lee Anderson should have lost the whip. I think it was an overreaction. I think Lee said, basically, I expressed myself clumsily, and I think that we should have accepted that and moved on, and we probably wouldn't be discussing it 4 days later or whatever it might be if that had been the case. But just because Richard Tice has met with Lee Anderson, I don't think we should take it as read, therefore, that Lee Anderson's definitely going to be defecting to Reform. I mean, I've met Richard Tice quite a few times. He's been round to my house, I've been round to his. It doesn't mean to say that I'm going to join the Reform Party. So I don't think we should put 2 and 2 together and come up with 23. I think we should...
Philip, I agree with a lot of what you say, but he met him apparently at a Holiday Inn at a motorway service station not long after he lost the whip. I mean, come on.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't follow, therefore, that he's going to defect. What we should be doing is Lee's actually written an article for the Daily Express tomorrow, which is up online already, which I've read. It seems to be a perfectly... I've had a quick scan of it. From what I read, it seems to be perfectly reasonable, and I hope that on the back of that, where Lee, in effect, clarifies what he was trying to say the first time round, and obviously it's a lot easier to do that when you write an article than when you're speaking off the cuff. I hope we can find a way that he can have the Conservative whip back. And, you know, I think Lee would accept that the Conservative Party's been good to him up until this weekend, perhaps, and hopefully we can restore the relationship that we had before then.
All right, Sajjad, I'll go to you to respond to that, and also just ask, look, politically speaking, from within the Conservative Party, if Lee Anderson is about to defect, if he then potentially takes a lot of the red wall with him or a lot of the grassroots of the Tory party, does he really have to apologise in order to come back, or can he just clarify?
Well, I really don't see that scenario unfolding that you've just described, that Lee Anderson has that sort of influence that he can take all of the red wall with him, or certainly that size of the electorate. I grew up in a northern working class community in Lancashire, so I know these communities very well indeed, and the way that they have been depicted as somehow being represented by this sort of political viewpoint across the board, all of them, I find actually extremely objectionable. These working class communities are very proud communities. They are very open-minded communities. They are very tolerant communities. This has been my experience of growing up in that community, as a member of that community. So I just don't recognise these depictions at all. Now, so far as Lee Anderson is concerned, I think one of the things that the party ought to do is to offer Lee an opportunity to actually come and see the other side of the argument. And actually, there is a variety of ways in which a progressive agenda can be presented to Lee Anderson. And if he is given that opportunity and he still refuses to take it, well, that's his choice. But I would much rather he took that choice and then he and the party could move forward, because ultimately we have a big electorate right across the country that will actually be supportive of Lee's position and Lee's views.
OK, Philip, I mean, is it then a problem? If Lee goes, it's just one man. It's one man who's got a few supporters, and it doesn't really matter.
No, I didn't say that.
No, I know.
I didn't say that, Patrick.
No, I know. I'm asking the question to Philip.
Well, of course, it would matter if Lee left. He's a very valued colleague, and he's not going to apologise. Of course he's not going to apologise. I mean, everywhere he goes, he has garlands wrapped around his neck, and he's being treated like a national hero. He's loving every minute of it. So he's certainly not going to... Why would he apologise when he's being treated like that? That's not going to happen. But we need to find a way, and I think the article he's written for the Express is a perfectly good way to actually say, well, look, here he's clarified the point he was trying to make in the first place. It's a perfectly reasonable point. Saj might not agree with it. We don't all have to agree with him to be a member of the Conservative Party, but the point of view that Lee expressed in the Express article tomorrow seems to be a perfectly legitimate view to hold, whether you're in the Conservative Party or not. And so I hope that on that basis we can all move forward, draw a line under it and move on together, all part of the same party, and actually doing what we should be doing, which is highlighting what a disaster Keir Starmer and the Labour Party would be for this country, because if we're not, we're going to be in danger of sleepwalking into a complete nightmare while we argue the toss about whether Lee Anderson should have used this particular word or not.
Yeah, look, this article went live since I've literally been sat in the studio, so I am just getting first sight of this now. As far as I can gather, the headline, the headline is, Lee Anderson warns Rishi Sunak he speaks for Tory voters, and he blasts, I'm not a racist. I mean, he's sticking to his guns, right? He's not going to move Sajid, is he? So, I mean, it's going to have to be Rishi Sunak who comes cap in hand to him, otherwise it's nothing.
Well, the reality is this, that as we move into the general election cycle, I do not see a position emerging whereby if the leader of the Conservative Party, and if it still happens to be Rishi Sunak at that time, if that particular leader takes the view that actually we are going to fight this election, not on policies, but on these sort of culture wars agendas, then I'm afraid there's going to be very little appetite in the country at large for that sort of campaign. What we need to see is a Conservative Party, once again, hungry for government, taking the case to the country, and a very vigorous campaign from the opposition, because that is what will be truly healthy for our democracy. And we do need to do a huge amount of repair work based upon the damage.
I actually think, Patrick, that Lee has moved quite a bit in this article tomorrow. It might say he's not backing down and all the rest of it, but actually he doesn't repeat the thing about Islamist extremists being Sadiq Khan's mates, which was the bit that caused all the uproar in the first place. He doesn't repeat that, and it's quite strikingly doesn't repeat that. So I think Lee, behind all of the sort of headlines, has actually moved to deal with the issues that people were concerned about in the first place. And like I say, I was on the back of that. Hopefully we can draw a line under this matter and move on with Lee back as a valued member of the Conservative Party in Parliament.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. Really great stuff. We could obviously talk about this all night, but we haven't got the time, unfortunately. That was Philip Davies and Sajad Karim. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, while illegal migrants get put up in hotels, you won't believe the squalor that members of our armed forces are being forced to live in. Plus, the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, landing in thick and fast. When I come back, well, it's all of tomorrow's news.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lots of people very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. Iran obviously denying it, but the next move from the United States, our key allies, will be absolutely key.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of talk about where this could go, whether the situation could be escalated. But I think the chatter is heading in the right direction, which is about de-escalation. So if there are going to be targeted sanctions against Iran, that's already happened through expelling certain diplomats and other measures there. But you can do that without arm-to-arm combat at this stage. But I think the US will be weighing up all of its options. Antony Blinken obviously gave a press conference in the United States yesterday to say that, there will be a response from the US, but it'll be at their time and it'll be in the way in which they think is the most appropriate. So all eyes are now on the United States as to when it makes that move.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, how domestic politics plays so much into international politics. The States, they've got a presidential election this year. We've got a budget coming up. So all the noise, both sides. You've got Donald Trump saying, go a bit more hawkish, I suppose you could say, than President Biden. And here we've got all the generals, we've got the Secretary of State for Defence coming out saying, we need conscription, we need more cash. But a lot of that is part of the sort of national narratives rather than actually looking at what's happening in Iran, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it plays into, the very uncertain times that we're living. And you're absolutely right. There'll be supporters of Donald Trump who are clearly adversaries of Joe Biden to say we must act now. It's a demonstration of showing your strength. Opponents of Biden will say that the US looks weak if it doesn't take action now against Iran, who are clearly, as we know, funding these at arm's length organisations like Hezbollah in Tehran, like the Houthis who are carrying out the attacks in the Red Sea. So Iran is responsible.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. It is time now for all of tomorrow's news tonight with all the front pages. Let's do it. So, start with the Metro. £16 for a pack of cigs. Huge tax rise as Hunt launches budget war on smoking and vaping. All right.
Sorry, Patrick.
Oh, no. That's all I've got left. The Daily Telegraph. UK blocks Macron's bid to send troops to Ukraine. This is a rift emerging now at the top of NATO as France suggests that the West could directly enter the conflict. MPs handed £30 million for extra security amid the Gaza threat. And J.K. Rowling there leading the backlash over a trans cat killer standing trial as a woman. Let's go to The Guardian. Tories putting party before sexual assault claims, says alleged victim. Woman says no action was taken after claim of being attacked by an MP. We go to the Eye now. Labour yet to convince 40% of target voters, new poll finds. Election danger lurks for Labour, they say. And May stoke fears of soft lead in national polls. Oh, interesting, really. The Eye appeared to be going off at the idea that they've yet to convince, quotes, Workington man and Stevenage woman, which are the kind of people that they apparently need to win an election. The Daily Mail. Indefensible. Despite growing global threats and warning from military top brass, Chancellor rejects calls to boost forces funding in budget. Jeremy Hunt faced fury last night after it emerged he had no plans to increase defence spending. They also do go off on a day of royal tragedy and drama. Sudden death of Lady Gabriella's husband rocks the royal family, and then William mysteriously misses his godfather's memorial. At The Sun, Hugh Rowe, BBC say sorry, teens family let down. It's the BBC yesterday apologising to the parents at the centre of the Hugh Edwards scandal. Right, OK, so those are all of, well, most of tomorrow's front pages for you. I am, yet again, joined by my press pack. I've got GB News presenter Nana Aquia, I've got Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, Jonathan Gullis, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. So, It's one of the inside stories, this. While this country continues to plough £8 million a day into putting migrants up in hotels, the quality of housing that our military are left with puts us to shame. So an army family that was forced to leave their military home shared images on social media last night of the crumbling accommodation after a wall in the bedroom caved in. This apparently follows 3 years of complaints to trying to get the issue sorted. Meanwhile, those who come over here illegally get a bit of luxury, don't they? Nana, gross double standards?
Absolutely. This reminds me of when I was young. My friends would come over and my mother, I don't know who the hell she turned into, would get out the Penguins, these lovely chocolate-wrapped biscuits. Normally we get cream crackers. And she'd be like, hello, everybody. And she'd be so nice to my friends. And then as soon as they've gone, she'd wrap everything back and she'd give us all cream crackers. This is exactly what's happening here, isn't it? I was like, who the hell is this woman? You know, but this is what's happening here. We are greeting everybody with these wonderful, as if we treat everybody else like that, but we don't.
Hang on a minute. That video does not represent what we're giving migrants who come here.
That's literally a video of the hotel.
I think they would. No, it's not. Let's look at the Bibi Stockholm. You've got 4 people to a room indefinitely there. Hang on a minute. Did it have Legionnaire's disease in there when it was used temporarily by workers? At this point, they don't even know when they're going to leave. Why would you want to stewing indefinitely in a travel lodge with 4 other men? It's not the equivalent of getting a lovely penguin.
Did you see that picture and the roof coming down? And we're paying $8 million.
I hate that is the army barracks offered. We have treated our military personnel appallingly. That's why no one wants to be in the army. That's why everyone keeps talking about conscription. We have massive recruitment and retention problems. But that does not mean. Let me finish the point. No, it does not mean that you mistreat migrants.
OK, right now, Jonathan, I have to put it to you.
Amy's exhausted me with that.
I tell you what.
I get like that.
All right, people, back on track now. I have to put it to you that it is under your government that we are seeing veterans or serving military personnel, not even veterans, living in squalor.
Look, I'm not comfortable with what I'm seeing. I've spent a lot of time with our armed forces up and down the country, visiting different barracks and spending time with those brave men and women to hear about their time in the forces and what needs to happen. And it's absolutely clear to me there needs to be a huge capital investment both into the accommodation but also into the barracks in general in terms of shelters and accommodation. And ultimately, I don't know if the Chancellor has ruled out. We literally won't know until the day. But I'm happy to join with colleagues from across the House to make sure that there is a long-term funding programme for capital investment because, as Amy does rightly say, it does impact recruitment and retention. It impacts morale. That's the last thing we need. These are heroes who put their lives in danger in order to enjoy, so we can enjoy the freedoms that we have. My grandfather served in 4-2 Commando. My other grandfather served in the RAF. Both served during the Suez Crisis. My great-great-uncle is still alive today. He was a D-Day veteran who received the Legion d'Honneur, Alan Gullis. So I'm very proud to be from a family with military background. He'd be incredibly sound. He'd also be disgusted with the quality of accommodation. Apparently is squalor, according to Amy, basically, when it comes to migrants who have illegally entered our country.
You have to accept that video that we showed there with the music and the guy in the travel lodge is probably being used by people smugglers to attract people to make that journey. And when they make that journey, they're not greeted with that.
Should we make one in the Bibi Stockholm and then maybe that'll deter them?
I mean, Amy, there are, to be fair, Amy, you can see the hotels these people are in. I mean, they do exist. These hotels do exist.
Look how happy he is. They rarely
he's relaxed. He's cosy. He's got his little TV.
They are in there indefinitely. Their mental health is appalling. They are suffering.
Oh, God. Oh, Amy, come on.
Jonathan, as someone that's suffered with their mental health, I would have thought you would at least acknowledge.
I've been into one of these hotels. They're not suffering mental health. They're actually living in good quality accommodation, getting 3 meals a day, getting some money as well as obviously being having security on the door to make sure they're well protected. All while we've got people on our streets who are fall into despair. In fact, one of the hotels used in Stoke-on-Trent was where we were putting women who were fleeing domestic violence, and we've had to remove all those to allow these illegal migrants to have the place instead. That is what I find abhorrent.
And yet, here we are, just to round us off nicely as if we planned it, the front of the Daily Mail, indefensible, despite growing global threats, warning from military top brass, and as we've just seen there, I nearly swore then, awful military accommodation. Apparently, Jeremy Hunt is facing fury after it emerged he has no plans to increase defence spending in next week's budget. There you go. Now, a Ministry of Defence spokesperson said, "We are committed to the welfare of service personnel and their families, and the Defence Secretary has made improving the standard of military accommodation a personal priority. This is why we are investing an additional £400 million over the next 2 years to improve military housing that is available, and more than 3,000 homes will have had improvements, including damp and mould treatments, by the end of the month." So that's their response. Now, look, coming up, our lovable lefty, Amy Nicole Turner, met up with some GB News viewers this weekend. Anyway, how do you think that went? Oh, hopefully good. She's still here. That's the main thing. Good, good. I hope it's good, otherwise it's terrible. Anyway, find out as I crown tonight's greatest Britain Union jackass. But next, Labour plans to train, with this, young male influencers to combat figures like Andrew Tate. Are they breeding the next generation of woke lefties? Tonight's panel gets stuck into that. Don't miss it.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen to the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
Right, OK, so now Labour plans to tackle misogyny by training young male influencers in our schools to combat figures such as Andrew Tate, apparently. So Tate has found fame, particularly among young people, through his controversial online videos, amongst other things, about women. And Labour Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson wants older schoolboys to coach younger pupils into recognising and calling out misogyny. Phillipson said, "It's really powerful if men all step in and make clear that kind of sexist and misogynistic behaviour is not acceptable and that they don't tolerate it either." All right, OK, well, look, no. Is this not a potential slippery slope, almost kind of taking Andrew Tate out of it here, which is government-mandated influencers is a bit weird?
I don't know. Look, if you look at the way things work at the moment, right, so they'll either buy ads and you hear government advertising on radio stations and wherever, TV adverts, they spend a lot of money on that. I think they're just using the next natural platform to advertise. But I worry that they could hijack the narrative because, as we've seen, the narrative, whatever they want to push across, they'll hijack it using influential people, and I'm concerned that young people might not see through that. So let me give you an example. So, for example, when it comes to the trans conversation, they might hijack the narrative to make it sound perfectly normal to call, for a man to be a woman and a woman to be a man. And I'm concerned that, yes, I understand it's the next natural platform. Yeah. But I don't
Well, it's only a certain type of influencer that would get the nod from, especially a Labour government.
But it depends what the conversation is. It depends what they're trying to get across.
My concern with this is, first of all, who decides who gets to be an influencer, who decides essentially what is correct and wrong messaging. And thirdly, the debate for too long around masculinity has been this idea that it's purely toxic. And I think that's really damaging and really unfair, because I think that the overwhelming majority of men, both young and old, respect women, want to obviously do the right things, and ultimately look for positive male role models without having to have some influence who's funded by the government. And I think that until we actually have a serious conversation about the responsibility of parents, and particularly fathers, to demonstrate to their children, I've got a daughter and I've got a son, I always think with my son, how I treat his mother is how he's going to grow up, about how he should respect and treat women. And I think that's therefore my responsibility to treat her with the utmost respect, to do the things that I should be doing in order for him to know that if that's how I treat your mother, that's how I expect you to treat any other woman.
A lot of it comes from, actually. I think that is where a lot of it comes from.
You think that, but then when you have a teenage son, external factors can play a massive part. And at the moment, we live in a society where teenage boys are more likely to know who Andrew Tate is than Rishi Sunak. He has a massive influence, and his whole game is targeting male insecurity.
Was that not all ever thus? I mean, people, all right, might not have been Andrew Tate necessarily, in social media, but I think 13-year-old boys are always more inclined to know, if you take it far back, who Eric Cantona was.
Right, and was Eric Cantona saying that your whole worth is based on your material possessions and your aggression towards women and letting your women know that you're owned? Do you know what I mean? The values that he is pushing are so dangerous, and I think this needs to be clamped down on. And it's not uncommon for governments to use sports stars, to use pop stars, to relay that messaging. And I don't think it'd be like getting Eric Cantona to counteract this message. You know?
I mean, I'll be honest with you.
If it was 13 years ago.
I'm in favour of the king doing absolutely whatever the heck he likes. But now, moving on. Joe Biden has made a statement on a ceasefire in Gaza. Here he is, speaking a load of waffle.
Oh, God. Can you give us a sense of when you think that ceasefire will start, sir?
Well, I hope by the beginning of the weekend. I mean, the end of the weekend. At least my national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
He's looking there.
Since then, easy now. Since then, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is said to be surprised. I'm not surprised at the US president's comments as negotiations are still not closed. Can I also just point out that there was a statement for all this talk, him saying the ceasefire is closed? Can I also just point out Hamas issues a statement, actual Hamas, saying it's too premature to talk about a ceasefire. So for all this rubbish that we've got going on in this country at the moment, actual Hamas don't really want a ceasefire. Why is the leader of the free world talking about global policy at an ice cream park?
Oh, God. He reminds me of a child eating an ice cream, if I'm totally honest with you. He's behaving like a 6-year-old standing there going...
That'll get clipped, be careful.
He's not with it. We all know he's not with it. It's like the emperor has no clothes. We can all see that he's naked. We know that he's not really pulling the strings. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's having ice cream. There's a war. There's all this stuff going on around his ears.
Patrick, he seems to have this weird obsession with going to ice cream parlours as photo ops. I mean, he reminds me actually of my grandmother, who was in a care home in the final years of her life getting ice cream. So, he's only playing into the picture that Donald Trump is going to portray of him, which is this is a man who's mentally gone, who's physically gone, and is not fit to be president of the United States of America.
Well,
go on, I mean, some people would say, hey, he's.
I think people are now just looking to find anything that they can clip up and push out as...
I mean, he volunteered...
But hang on a minute, because we, as the UK, are now we're in recession. The US is flourishing.
Are you saying...
So he must be doing something, right?
And we're not going to... perfectly with it. I mean, you have seen him...
but I'm just saying...
All right,
on paper...
You forgot who the maths were.
Come on, mate.
All right, wonderful panel. We have just about got time to do today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. All right, we are going to have to be rapid with this. So, Nana, who's your greatest Britain?
My greatest Britain is the military wives for forcing the Ministry of Defence to U-turn over the housing. They were prioritising people with the number of kids rather than the rank of the officer. But the wives stood up and said, nah, we ain't having it.
Yeah, good. OK, Jonathan?
The victims of the Horizon scandal, they came before the Business and Trade Select Committee, 3 of them today, including Mr Alan Bates, and were incredibly brave in sharing their very harrowing stories, including one individual who had to flee the country for 15 years before returning here and then was falsely accused of having paid off a £100,000 mortgage that didn't even exist. So for their bravery in standing up for everyone else to make sure that justice will hopefully one day be fully done, I think they deserve the shout.
All right, go on, Amy.
They just want their money, though, don't they? Not your nomination. Anyway, my nomination is Simon Lee, who is a GB News viewer, and his wife Trang, because I met them in Manchester over the weekend, and they came up to me and they said, "Oh, we watch you on GB News," and I was like, "Oh my God, like, what are you going to throw at me?" And they were like, "We love your contributions, we love Rebecca, and we love Benjamin too."
Right.
So they like to hit the broad.
No, thank you very much. I don't mean that. Please keep watching. Today's greatest Britain are the army wives. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, what were their names again?
Simon and Trang.
Simon and Trang, thank you very much for watching. Your support does mean the world. And so, yes, thank you. Right, very quickly, who's Union Jackass?
My Union Jackass has got to be The Guardian for calling the cat killer murderer a woman who it turns out is a trans, so ultimately he is a man.
OK, quickly.
Who put a cat in a blender? Sorry.
The actual Post Office executives, it turns out the CEO is actually also under investigation, as well as the former chairman, and has told the committee under oath that he hadn't thought about resigning, but allegedly there's now an 80-page document that says he did consider resigning, which means he'll be found in contempt of Parliament if that's true.
Good grief. All right, very quickly.
Jeremy Hunt for the tax rises that will just decimate our public services, even for tax cuts, sorry. That would be rubbish. Rubbish, don't they?
Today's Union Jackass is The Guardian. There we go. Nana has won twice there, so well done, Nana. Right, OK, look, thank you very much, everybody who's been watching. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Mwah.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Will be a foggy start for some of us tomorrow, but it should stay dry across eastern areas. But through this evening, we'll see a weather front push into the southeast, so that's when there's the greatest risk of a chance of rain across southeastern areas. Behind it, though, it will turn much clearer. So some cloud and rain through this evening across the southeast, but elsewhere it should be a fairly dry evening. But some fog will start to develop quite quickly through the night. So it will be a bit of a murky start for many areas, particularly across central southern England, but also up through the Pennines and across eastern areas of Scotland as well. So we'll feel quite cold tomorrow morning once again, but it won't be quite as frosty as it was this morning. And there will be some early sunshine where we don't see any fog through tomorrow, particularly across the far east coast, and many southeastern areas should stay dry through much of the day. But elsewhere it will turn much wetter as the day goes on, particularly across parts of the southwest of England and Wales, where we'll see some quite persistent rain at times, but also across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland and Northern England. But it will feel milder across the UK. The back of that rain will push into the southeast on Thursday, so quite a wet day to come in the southeast on Thursday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a mix of sunny spells and showers once that rain does clear through. And that's the story as we head through the rest of the week. A showery picture through Friday and Saturday as well. And after a milder spell through Wednesday and Thursday, it looks to turn colder from Friday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem